Today, Senator Graham and I, on the 13th anniversary of the attacks of September 11, 2001, and at this anniversary, sadly and unfortunately, we cannot agree, and we cannot say, as President Obama did last night, that America is safer. In fact, in many respects, America is in more danger than at any time since the end of the Cold War. When you look around the world at the challenges, the aggression, the provocations, the continued slaughter of innocent Ukrainians, it is a classic example of what happens when the United States of America decides to withdraw from the world and create a vacuum. That vacuum is filled by the forces of evil, and innocents throughout the world suffer, and America's security is threatened. So I strongly disagree, and I believe that most objective observers would strongly disagree with the President's assertion last night that America is safer. By no objective measurement is America safer. In fact, when you look at Twitter and Facebook, you will see that ISIS is threatening the United States of America and urging others to come to the United States of America and attack the United States of America. And yesterday, in hearing before the Department of Homeland Security, it is very clear that our border is not secure. And that is a recipe for at least attempts of those of ISIS who have dedicated themselves to the destruction of the United States of America to be made possible. Mr. Baghdadi, the head of ISIS, who was once a resident in the United States-run prison camp in Iraq called Camp Bucca, spent 4 years there, left, and on his way out, he said to his American captors, "See you in New York." I'm not making that up. He said, "See you in New York." Mr. Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, message has been attack and destroy the United States of America. So no, Mr. President, America is not safer. In fact, because of a feckless foreign policy, America is in greater danger than it has been in some respects in my lifetime. Not in all, but in some. I'd like to say that, and the fact is, the President of the United States sees ISIS as some kind of terrorist organization. It is not. ISIS is a terrorist army. ISIS has the largest area in history of wealth, of military equipment, and capability of a terrorist organization in history, and they spread in an area larger than the size of the state of Indiana. I'd like to say that the President got some things right in his speech on ISIS. He seemed to have read the op-ed piece that my colleague Senator Graham and I wrote in the New York Times 2 weeks ago, because he adopted most of our proposals, most, but not all. The President compared his plan to the counterterrorism approach he has taken in Somalia and Yemen. That is so disturbing to think that a strategy against ISIS would be the same as against al-Qaeda in Somalia and Yemen. There are terrorist organizations in Somalia and Yemen. And yes, we have been killing with drones, but we have by no means defeated them. And to compare what ISIS has done, is achieving, and the slaughter that ISIS is carrying out compared to the terrorist organizations in Somalia and Yemen reflect a fundamental misunderstanding on the part of the President of the United States of the threat we face. The problem is also that even al-Qaeda has not been defeated in those countries. So the President says he wants to degrade and defeat, the way that they're attacking al-Qaeda in Yemen and Somalia, they're not defeated. So what the president proposed last night can possibly, if done correctly, degrade ISIS, but it can't destroy ISIS, and we must destroy ISIS, or sooner or later, according to our heads of intelligence, whether it be the director of the CIA or the director of the FBI or the Secretary of Homeland Security. They want to attack the United States. Their goal is to attack the United States of America. So let's start out with what the president got right. He described the right goal, to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIS. He called for expanding airstrikes to go on offense against ISIS. He explained the need to hit by ISIS both in Iraq and Syria. He called for training and arming moderate Syrian opposition forces, and he described elements of a comprehensive strategy, diplomatic, economic, and military, all of which we, Senator Graham and I, have long championed. He talked about the formation of a coalition. His Secretary of State, he said he wanted as many as 40 nations. So far, he has 9. And the interesting thing about it, there's not a single Middle Eastern country that has joined this so-called coalition. Why is that? Is it because they're not afraid of ISIS? Of course they're afraid of ISIS, but they don't trust the United States of America. And I hear that directly from leaders all over the Middle East. They don't trust us because of the president's bungling, incredible, bad decision after he once said that if Syria crossed certain red lines and used chemical weapons, that then we would respond. They crossed that line. He then said we were going to respond, and then after a 45-minute walk with his chief of staff, announced to the world that we were not going to strike. He was going to Congress, knowing full well he would not get that permission from Congress. That nuance was lost on countries in the Middle East that were prepared to join us, with airstrikes into Syria. So it is not surprising. It is not surprising at all that so far the president and his Secretary of State have been unable to convince any of these Middle Eastern countries, and we need them. We need them very badly. Well, one of the main things the president didn't say and should have said is that he recognizes that he'd made a mistake. Every president has made mistakes. Certainly George W. Bush did in Iraq, and had at least the courage to fire his Secretary of Defense, adopt the surge, which had basically stabilized Iraq. It had stabilized Iraq before we made the decision not to do so. Every one of the president's military advisors, the smartest people that any of us know, General Petraeus, General Keane, General Allen, I could go down the list, argued strenuously for leaving a residual force behind. The President of the United States decided not to. Now we are trying to rewrite history and say, well, the President really wanted to. Find me one statement that the President of the United States made publicly that he wanted to leave a residual force behind, and I can find you 50 where he bragged about the last combat troop had left Iraq and we'd left a safe, stable, prosperous Iraq behind. A lot of howlers about how well we had done in Iraq. If we had left the residual force, the situation in Iraq would not be where it is today. That allowed the Iraqi security forces to weaken, squandered our influence in Iraq, and harmed our ability to check Prime Minister Maliki's worst instincts. His failure to support and arm the Free Syrian Army 2 years ago. I have been in Syria. I know how brave these people are. I know how disappointed they were when we failed to arm and equip them. 2 years ago, his entire national security team, including his Secretary of State, Secretary Clinton, strongly urged the President of the United States to arm, train, and equip the Free Syrian Army. The President of the United States turned them down. the President of the United States overruled the unanimous opinion of his national security team, and that, my friends, was a huge impact. Again giving rise to ISIS, again giving Bashar Assad the ability and capability to slaughter innocent Syrians. It breaks my heart that 192,000 Syrians have been massacred by Bashar Assad. He continues to drop these barrel bombs, which are horrible killers. Bashar Assad continues to have 150,000 Syrians dying in his prison camps. I would wish that every American would see those pictures that were smuggled out of the tortured, killed, and starved to death Syrians. 192,000 of them. And we could have turned that around 2 years ago. And 3 years ago, it was when the President of the United States said, it's not a matter of whether Bashar Assad is leaving, it's a matter of when. He also said 3 years ago, it's time for Bashar Assad to leave. And Bashar Assad today continues to slaughter innocent men, women, and children. Millions of refugees have fled the country, and the horrors continue of this butchery. And what changed? One aspect that changed the battlefield equation when the President of the United States said it's not a matter of but when, was when Iran, who some now are asking us to work with, Iran sent in Hezbollah, 5,000 of them from Lebanon, and it changed the momentum on the battlefield. And finally, not finally, but Senator Lindsey Graham and I were called over to the White House. We went in to meet the President of the United States after the President of the United States had said that he was going to strike Syria. We sat there, and the President looked us in the eye, and he said, I want to do three things: degrade Bashar Assad, upgrade the Free Syrian Army, and change the battlefield equation. Senator Graham and I, taking his word for it, went out on the driveway and said, we are backing the President of the United States. Several days later, without being notified, we were stunned to read that the President of the United States had changed his mind. He had not told us the truth in the Oval Office. That is a unique experience for me, where I've been in the Oval Office under many presidents of the United States. I'm confident that the steps the President laid out last night can degrade ISIS, but that's not sufficient to protect our people. We need special forces and advisors on the ground. When the President continues to say there will be no boots on the ground, there are 1,700 boots on the ground right now. There will be more boots on the ground, but they won't be in the form of combat units. But if we're really going to defeat ISIS, we're going to need close air support, forward air controllers, intelligence capability, special forces, and many others. We'll soon have more than 1,500 there, and there will have to be more. Tell the American people the truth, Mr. President. Those young men and women are going there, and they're going to be in harm's way, and they're going to be exposed to combat. Tell the American people the truth. We need to do a lot more. I'd like to mention one other aspect before I turn to my friend from South Carolina, who was with me in 2008 at a town hall meeting. A man stood up at the town hall meeting and said, Senator McCain, how long are we going to be in Iraq? I said, we may be in Iraq for a long, long time. I said, because Iraq, although we have sustained the situation, we have stabilized it. That was after the surge had been implemented and succeeded. I said, but it's very fragile. We're going to have to leave a residual force behind, as we did in Japan, in Germany, Korea, Bosnia, where we have left residual forces behind for the sake of stability. Well, in case many of my colleagues have forgotten, I'm sure they would, I was pilloried. McCain wants to stay in Iraq. Yes, I wanted a residual force in Iraq, not to engage in combat, to provide stability, intelligence, and other capabilities. Now we know what happens when we left Iraq. Now we know the consequences. I hope that all those people that called me all of the names that I am not going to repeat here would render an apology, because I was right, because I said if we leave Iraq completely, then we risk the great danger of it deteriorating. I'm saying to my colleagues, what has happened today, and the situation today didn't have to be this way. None of the challenges we now face in Iraq and Syria had to be this dire. The rise of ISIS did not have to happen. We've lost too much time and missed too many opportunities, but we can still defeat our terrorist enemies, and we must protect our people and our partners and secure our national interests in the Middle East. The President's plan, if he implements them, if he understands that this is not Yemen and Somalia, if he understands that this is a direct threat to the United States of America, if he comes to Congress and asks for, not welcome, but asks for debate and amendments and votes that shows the American people's representatives will support them in this effort, then I think we have a chance of succeeding. But I have to tell my colleagues, I'm not very optimistic from the start I saw last night. I'd like to yield to my colleague from South Carolina.